I wanted to talk to you tonight about a place called the Black Mountain. Now, if you remember a while back, I made a video about what's in a name, scary places, like Devil's Canyon, Devil's Gorge, Ape Canyon. So I really don't know why it's called Black Mountain. Perhaps there was a fire there. Perhaps it's an old Indian name. There's a lot of Indian names up in this area. We'll get to the exact location in a minute. But what struck me as odd is in 2013, I had a Sasquatch encounter. It's well documented on this channel where something thumped and growled on the side of the house in the middle of the night. And this was after a bunch of wildfires. This was at my dad's house. He lives not too far from here. From this, he's just right down the road, so to speak. And it was very interesting because you go into BFRO website and you look in California in Riverside County, and most of the Sasquatch encounters are in this Idlewild region in this range of mountains, which makes sense because it's kind of the only real mountains up there in Riverside County. So when I started giving presentations and started getting a little more popular and people were researching my work, I've been really shocked that a number of people have reached out to me. Like a bunch of people have reached out to me about the same area having Bigfoot encounters. And most of them, if not all of them, have actually been down to this Black Mountain campground trailhead area. It's a pretty big area, but it's just surprising that it's been like 5 or 6 different people have all come to me in this big mountain range and told me about this one area that they've had creepy encounters or saw strange things. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So one of the things, just so you guys know what I'm talking about, in Southern California, these mountain ranges, Big Bear, and then south of it is the Idlewild Mountain Range, where I'm talking about here, the San Jacinto Mountains. And it's kind of at the tail end, almost at the end of the Pacific Crest Trail, which goes from Mexico to Canada, and thousands of people hike it every year. People do have Bigfoot sightings when they're out camping all through the Sierras and going up through Washington and going up through Canada, as you can imagine. But all the way down through Southern California and through the desert regions, people have seen Bigfoot. People have seen other cryptid creatures and had strange things happen to them, just like most people who spend enough time in the woods. Although you'll talk to people who say they hiked the whole thing and never saw anything odd. Maybe they got lucky. Maybe they're ignoring it. Who knows? But just so you know that this Black Mountain, it's this trailhead off the 243 highway, which you drive up, and as you drive up this kind of twisty mountain road, it's kind of a dirt road, a packed dirt road. There's other little campgrounds and turnouts and trailheads along the way going up there, and it goes back quite a ways. And there's 2 or 3 campgrounds on the way up. There's a big campground towards the top and lots of parking spots. And a lot of rock climbers like it because there's all these big boulders that they can practice on. They put their little mats down and they can climb up. And they have the Pacific Crest Trail. And I hiked a small portion of the Pacific Crest Trail stepping off from here. And when you get to the top of the Black Mountain, you can actually see down in the valley where the 10 freeway is and see the Casino Morongo and all of the desert. It's a spectacular view. It's a great place. But you can see right along the Pacific Crest Trail comes right along there. And this is a few miles north of town of the Idlewild and a few miles north even of Pine Cove, which is kind of a sub-community of Idlewild. So I was surprised when I started talking about the Idlewild region that, like I said, quite a few people reached out to me about having Bigfoot encounters and told me various things. Some of them are pretty out there stories. Some of them are fairly conservative stories. Whenever I've gone there, I've always noticed there's a lot of closed campgrounds and a lot of locked gates, no trespassing things. There's locked trailheads, which to me is always kind of a big sign of maybe something's going on. They don't want people snooping around. And you got to remember, just the other side of the valley where the 10 freeway is the Big Bear mountain range, which is even bigger. Where Big Bear and Arrowhead is, and that's where Claudia Ackley is. That's where she had her Sasquatch encounter. That's where they've had plenty of sightings. And between them is the desert, and past these 2 mountain ranges is all this desert where they've had reports of the Yucca Man for many years, these desert Sasquatch, and dogman-like creatures. So there's quite a history of actually Bigfoot in these Southern California mountains, which might surprise a lot of people. So the first story, a lot of people shared their stories with me about this area in Black Mountain. But the first story I'd like to share with you guys is a lady said that she spent a lot of time in the 70s and 80s camping in the Black Mountain campgrounds as a couple, and going up there with her dad and her family. And then in the late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere in that time frame, I want to say it was the late 90s, she brought her kids up there. And I think she had 4 kids, I want to say. And they're all under the ages of 10, I believe. I think the youngest one was like 3.5 or something. And she just went up there for the day, packed some sandwiches. And I think she stopped at the ranger station trying to remember where it was because it had been years. A brave lady taking 4 kids out in the woods by herself, just trying to wrangle them. And what she did is she talked to the ranger station, and they said, oh, well, overnight camping at one of the lower campgrounds is, you can't really do it right now, but you can park if you want to hike around and look around. And so that's what she did. She brought her kids up there, and she got a very eerie feeling when she got out of the car. The campground was empty. There was nothing going on. Some big logs looked like they were moved around, like around campsites and stuff like that, and crossed over. She looked, and there was quite a few trees that looked like they were pushed over into X patterns, and it looked like the campground was not very well maintained. And I guess there was a trailer there for the park ranger, or the person who takes care of the campground, and it looked pretty well deserted, like no one had been in there for a long time. So she said it was this kind of creepy abandoned area, like it wasn't really maintained, with big logs drug around and stuff like that. And then when she was there, she started hearing things in the bushes. And then she wasn't really a Bigfoot person, so she didn't describe it as that, but she heard this kind of banging sound. She said it sounded like logs and trees clacking together, or someone hitting a baseball bat against the ground, or clacking rocks. She kept hearing it all around in the campground area because it's all on a mountain hillside. She kept hearing it from farther up, and then she'd hear another one from farther down, and she was just remember trying to think to herself, what animal does that? And then she heard things moving in the bushes up above her. She could hear things, a couple hundred yards up the hill moving around. And her kids were playing and jumping on rocks and picking up sticks and running around, and all the kids' things to do there. And she was getting a little weirded out. And then she kept hearing some whoops. She kept hearing strange whooping noises. It sounded like a human, but bigger, imitating handle, like if a person, like a really huge guy, was trying to do like an owl call, like a whoo, whoo. And she was just really weirded out because she was trying to figure out what was going on. It was the middle of the day. And she said, okay, well, let's get moving. So they started walking down this one trail. And she got to this one trail, and she saw all these weird sticks, like hanging from tree branches, like the withes of tree branches hanging from other tree branches. And they weren't trees anywhere around there. She found all these strange rock circles, like campfire rings, but there was no fire. She actually thought at the time that it might have been something like a satanic ritual or something. Those were her words, not mine. But she just said it was a very eerie, creepy place with all sorts of knocks and whoops and strange noises she was hearing. But she just kept, not being a Bigfoot person, just kept thinking it was deer and it was birds and it was owls. And she started to go through her mind of why is this campground closed? And then what really got her is she kept finding what she found out later were deer bones. Because I guess she found like an antler stuck up in one of these trees. And she found some other bones on the ground. And they were wild animal bones. And she found bits of fur that were also hanging from the tree. Not like torn up on the ground like coyotes had got to it, or a hawk had got to it, but like parts on the ground and feet and, stuff from animals that were torn up. And she saw this, and her kids were like, Mom, what's that? And she got really freaked out by this, and she could hear stuff moving around in the bushes, and she kept hearing weird hoops and more knocks and stuff. And by this time she got really freaked out, and she moved her kids down to the trail and got back in her car. And as she was going back to the car, she swears something else was pacing her down the trail, because she'd take a bunch of steps and the kids would get distracted, and she'd have to kind of shove them along and pick up and carry one. And then she'd hear more footsteps behind her. And, after seeing the bones hanging from the tree and these big logs drug around, she was quietly freaking out in her mind. But for her credit, she was trying to hold it together for her kids. And I guess she got back in the car and drove out of there, and was like, okay, closed, creepy campground, logs moved around. She didn't know what to make of it. For the longest time, she actually thought it was some kind of devil worshippers or some kind of strange thing going on, hermits living up there. She didn't know what to make of it. So that was the first story. And she called me, she emailed me a few times, And then we talked on the phone a couple of times, and she was in tears. She could tell she was reliving it. It still freaks her out. She was telling me she wanted to get her husband or have me meet her up there or somebody and bring a gun and go check it out because she was that scared of this place, and she hasn't been back up there since. So that was the first story I wanted to share with you guys. So the second story I want to share with you guys was much more recently than the late 90s. I guess it was a couple years ago. This lady approached me. I believe it was at UPARS, LA, when I was giving the 10 types of Bigfoot talk there. The lady lit up because I told her about, I'd been in Idlewild, and that's where I had my encounter. And lo and behold, she was telling me about Black Mountain. And she had been the third or fourth such individual to tell me about it at that time. And then a couple more talks and other meet and greets that I did. I met other people who were telling me about the same area. But anyway, her story, a lot shorter, was her and her husband were driving up there. I think they were staying in Idlewild for the day. Or for a couple days, and they went up Black Mountain because they heard trails, and I think they wanted to look for wild flowers. And they were driving up the road, and then they could see this ridge line above them, and she sees something huge, and she instantly thought it was a Bigfoot. Being into a paranormal stuff, she already kind of knew Bigfoot and kind of had some idea of what they were. So she stopped, and then right above the ridgeline from where they were, she says she could see it. And she could see it walking past her along the ridgeline, kind of going through these trees. And she could see branches bending and stuff like that. And she tells her husband, stop. And they're both looking out the window, and she picked up a little pair of binoculars, and she was looking at it, and she could see it as plain as day. Well, the bizarre thing was her husband could not see it. Now, this lady, I don't know, you could claim mental illness, you could claim whatever you want. I don't think that's the case at all. I think she was telling the truth. Her husband could see the branches moving, and he knew something was up there because he could see the branches moving. And I guess when they got out of the car, they could hear something moving around up there, but he couldn't see it. And she was just like, it's like 8.5 feet tall, and it's going from trees to trees up there, and it would stop. And I guess at one point it looked down at them, and it was kind of just moving through the trees, and it was just very, very strange. It was like she could see it, but her husband couldn't. And then she said later in her travels in the paranormal world that she thinks it was something interdimensional or some kind of a spirit or something very strange going on, that she could see it. There's physical evidence of it being up there with things moving and sounds being made, but she could see it with her eyes and her husband couldn't. Yeah, very strange. I've had a couple other stories of people telling me that they heard things out there camping. I had one person come up to me, told me that their stuff was gone through in the middle of the night, that they were out there camping, and their cooler was gone through. Stuff was taken out of the cooler and set on the picnic bench, but nothing was taken. And they heard other stuff, and the guy heard something walking around at night, and he just thought it was a deer. But then something very, very quietly took stuff out of the cooler and looked around and looked through it. And he said he had beer, he had lunch meat, hot dogs, stuff that, if you were going to steal food, or if it was a homeless guy or something looking for something to eat or for beer, he said they would have taken the beer, but he said none of that was touched, as some of it was placed oddly outside there. And he said the entire time he felt like he was being watched and got creeped out. And said that he heard a couple what he described as tree knocks. And and he said that was an odd encounter. A couple other people have told me that they've saw and had strange things going on up here in Black Mountain. So I wanted to break down these encounters for you real quick here. We don't want this video to be too long. I'll probably do a part 2 and 3, share some more stories. I also do want to do an investigation since it is pretty close to my dad's house. Want to go out there. I'll probably go armed and have a GoPro camera and sniff around some of these campgrounds and hike down some of these trails and see if there's anything to it. The first story was probably almost 20 years ago now, with the strange sticks and trees and logs being moved around. But I have noticed that there are quite a few closed campgrounds up there, and different things going on, which always kind of struck me as odd. I think a lot of times when you find closed roads or closed campgrounds that normally are open, especially in busy summer months, I think sometimes that's a cover for Bigfoot or other cryptid activities or strange things that we don't understand. And also, when it comes to these encounters, if we want to look at things really objectively and even throw Bigfoot out the window and say, there's no Bigfoots up there. The finding bones in a tree and large logs scraped around, and finding large logs drug around, and finding tree structures and finding and hearing knocks in the woods and just being generally creeped out and feeling of being watched, you got to say something strange is going on in this area. Now, when I went up there, it was kind of before I heard a lot of this, and it wasn't really going through my mind, to be honest. But I didn't really stop and take a look around. We went up to the top, my wife and I, and looked around at top, and we're like, wow, this is the remote woods up here, right along the Pacific Crest Trail, which a number of people have gone missing there over the years. It's kind of sad to say as well, kind of missing 411 stuff. So the first encounter with the strange stuff, I could just imagine being a mom up there with my kids, not really knowing what's going on and being super freaked out. Could it have been humans? Could it be something else going on? Could it be a cryptid creature like a Bigfoot or something? Absolutely. I mean, I am a believer. I don't even say I'm a believer. I'm a knower. I know these creatures exist, and they have a history of being up there, so they could be a good suspect in it. As far as the second encounter of them materializing and the lady not being able to see it and the husband being able to see it or not being able to see it, and she could, I don't know what to make of that. That sounds really out there to me. But like I said, I try to believe everybody, not necessarily believe, but always try to listen to everybody, I should say. Everybody should be heard. You should always file it, even the real bizarre accounts like this. Something's going on. Is it something interdimensional? Is there some kind of witch doctor stuff going on up there? Is there a gas leak making people hallucinate? I don't know. It's all good questions. But I find it very fascinating. Like I said, I'm going to do another part to this video one of these weeks when it's not too snowy or too bad. I want to go up there and take a look around. And that's it for today, folks. Hope you enjoyed the video. Lots more coming up. Please stay safe out there.